Okay, let's take a quick review on the new KitOps. When you install KitOps Pro, you will only get this one KPACK right here. And this KPACK is a folder of inserts that you can add to the scene. For instance, let's say we have this cube and we want to add the insert. Let me go ahead and turn on the modifiers and the controls real quick so I can see what's going on. So first I want to add something like this data connector. Okay, so add this, let's zoom up on this a little bit. And I'm going to add this insert right here. Now I can scroll the mouse, and as you can see, I'm going from large, medium, small. Let's scroll this up. Watch these. So it's going to go large, medium, small. I can set those up, and those actually can be set as different scales. Now, if I want to add it at a different size, I just turn off this Autoscale insert, and then I can just scroll it up and down all I want, right? And let's say I scroll it down to this size right here, and just add it here. And then I want to add another insert. Now it's going to basically add this at the same size it was previously added. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, if I hold the Shift key down when I click, I'm holding the Shift key down now, I can just keep going around and adding them wherever I want to. And then release the Shift key to add the last one. So that's the basic way that KitOps works. Now, one of the differences in the brand new version 3 is that if I want to move an insert, I can grab the parent of it, right? And I can say G and move it, and it'll move it around. And notice it's not snapping to anything, right? So if I want to move it with a snap, then what I'll need to do is I need to select the insert. That'll select it. And I can actually hold down a couple of these and select inserts, select them both. So that's how I can select multiple inserts. If I want to actually just relocate it, I can just click on any part of the insert and hit relocate, and it'll allow me to move this anywhere I want to, including the whole insert, which is, the insert is more than just the cutter. It's actually all these little parts that are also part of it. And if I hit the F key, it's going to snap to the face of whatever object I'm looking at. If I hit the E key, it'll snap to the edge. If I hit the C key with the E key snapped, I'm going to snap to the center of the edge, like this. And if I hit the V key, I'm going to snap to the vertex, like this. And if I hit the N key, it just lets me move it anywhere I want. Now, as I look at this, these are the buttons right here. So this is snap mode. There's the V key, this is the edge key, and this is the face key. Now, also, this is something called hard points, and we'll talk about those in a different video. The other part of this is that you can duplicate an insert. So if you just select any part of the insert, and keep in mind, if we look at this insert, it's got basically 2 different meshes on it, but you can select any part of it, and then you can say duplicate insert. And then when you do that, it's going to actually move it, and you can move it around anywhere you want to. But if you hit the X button, it's only going to move it in the X plane, right? So that's something to keep in mind, right? Now you can delete an insert. So if you select any part of something and you delete it, this happens, right? If I add this insert here and scroll it up, and then I just go in here and say X delete, and then I say X delete, I leave this whole, because as I look at the inserts modifiers for this, you'll see I have this difference here, and we don't automatically delete that difference when you delete it. What we have instead now is we have this tool that says clean Boolean modifier. So it'll go through and look for any KitOps inserts, and it'll clean those out. So that's what this new feature does. So edit insert is a really new feature, and it's very interesting. So now it basically opens up in a separate window, right? So we can see we have 2 windows, this one and this one. So we have a separate window, and I can come in here and edit this insert. So if I go look at this in material preview mode, and now with this being displayed, you can see that you can go ahead and you can edit this all you want, right? So if I want to change the materials, let's say the brass pins, let's make those, for instance, we'll just make them like chrome or something like that. We can just do that, just click that. And then we can just go back into KitOps here, and I can save the insert. Okay, let's talk about remove KitOps props. Why would you ever want to do that? Let's just add this like a insert here. Roll it up to this. Okay, and then I'm going to delete this, and I just have this insert right here. And it actually has a target, but it's gone, right? This is the target right here. And if I want to try and add something to it, let's go ahead and add this to it. It doesn't really snap to it. And the reason for that is because this is already an insert. So there's 2 ways of fixing this. One is I can remove the KitOps props, and the other is that I can place on selected insert. So if I do place on a selected insert, I can just come in here and just put it here. And also if I select on this and say remove KitOps props, I can turn this off now and I can add the insert here, right? So that works good too. And then of course, if you look at this, you'll see this is the target of this insert. Every insert has a target if you drag and drop it onto another object. So there's the target. I can reset the target. And mesh, let's do another cube and move it over here. So let's take this insert right here and let's go ahead and put it on the cube. And then when I say relocate insert, you'll see now it's going to move over to here. And I can also do this as well. And another thing, when we add inserts, we can hold the Alt key down and we can rotate by 15-degree increments, right? So we can just do that as well. And of course, not holding the Alt key down, we again use the same mouse scroll button to scale it. Okay, and then also we have this replace insert. So if I select an insert, anything I want, and I come in here and say, I just want to replace that with something like this, and I can hit the replace insert. Now come in at the scale that one was set at. So wherever I want that, and I can select as many as I want, right? I can select this one, and then choose to replace it with, let's do this one here and say replace inserts, and it'll replace them both. And again, they come in at the right scale and all that. So then there's the search inserts, and this is when you have a lot of different KPACKs installed, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. We don't have a lot of them installed. We'll wait till we install a lot, then we'll do the search. Autoscale is if you know that you want everything to come in at 100%, then just hit the 100% one, and then when you add an insert to an object, now let's go ahead and delete this insert and add this insert. Notice that nothing was selected, that's why it popped in here. So we want to make sure something is selected. And that's the 100% size for that insert, right? If I scroll the mouse wheel, I'll go down to the 25% size and the 50% size. And these are all medium, small. You can set them all to anything you want. You can say small instead of 25 was a little larger if you wanted to, 44. And then when you add the insert again, you can scroll it. Medium, small is going to be 44 at that point. So that's how that works. Autoscale insert, as we mentioned earlier, if you just want to add an insert and just use the mouse wheel to just scroll it to whatever size you want, you can do it that way. And you can also use the mouse wheel plus the Alt key, as I mentioned earlier, to rotate it. You can parent inserts. So sometimes, let's say we want to put a cutter in here, and I'm going to go ahead and let's turn on parent insert, and let's grab the cutter, this one here, and let's add that insert there. Okay, now that's parented. I can take this and I can move this around, and that cutter is going to stay with it. This is not on default for a variety of different reasons, but it's one of the ones that you may want to consider using if you plan on moving your target object much. And then we talked about place on selected insert and flipping placement. Sometimes in kind of CAD situations, it may be a good idea to want to flip something. And especially with design magic, if you may have an insert you want to flip to the other side of the plane that you're inserting it. So let me show you what I'm talking about there. Let's grab something that's got let's grab this guy here and add insert, and that's what it normally looks like. So let's go ahead and flip the placement, add insert, and there you can see that now when we're trying to snap to it, see that we've actually flipped the side of and we're actually trying to snap to the back side of that face because we're flipping the normals, so it's snapping to the back side. So that's what flip placement will do for you. Not used a lot, but every now and then it has some value. Let's go up to some of the other features right here. You can also say right click and say KitOps relocate. So we can do it this way too. So just so we're clear. And in fact, you can select an insert, right click and say delete it, relocate it, select it, all kinds of things. So if we want to, we can select this. I can say mirror on the Y. Let's go ahead and delete this insert and delete this insert. And then let's go ahead and mirror on the X. This, I'm just going to select this and say GZ. And as I move it, I'm just moving that GX. Let's do that. I'm not moving the cutter with it, right? So don't forget, if you're going to move it just regularly using the move commands, make sure you just select the insert. Don't forget it's mirrored also. So we'll say GX, and now this thing works correctly. So that's the thing to keep in mind. And as you noted, if you look at the actual object, you'll see that these differences are being created as exact and not fast. So this can be set in the preferences. I like to keep it as exact because you're always going to get better solving that way, but it's a little slower. If you're on a slower machine, you may want to use fast. We also have an array. So let's turn off these and we can say, let's array 2, and let's just move this a little bit. So you can array them and we can say 3, that kind of thing, right? So that's nice as well. We talked about the snap modes. We have a line. Let's go ahead and I'm going to turn off the array, and let's go ahead and add another insert. By the way, notice that I've selected this insert, and when I add this insert, because we don't have place on selected insert, it's going to look at the target here, knowing which one to add. So it's always going to add to the target of the selected insert, right? So if I add this one here, something like this, you can see. So if I select this and this, I remember if I G these, we're just selecting part of them, but it doesn't really matter because when I using these buttons, it'll automatically select them all. So then we have the ability to align these guys, right? So I can align them this way, that way, this on top of each other, that way. So you get the idea. And then if I want to, I just select one and say, relocate it. So I can just move that one over here. And this one, relocate it. So we move that over here, something like that. So that works quite well. Clean Boolean modifiers, we already talked about that. So if you select the object, you say clean Boolean modifiers, it'll clean them if it's got unlinked inserts. Again, if I select this and delete it and then say, notice that even though if I select this and delete it, it's going to delete that mesh, but that cutter, but it's not going to delete anything else. And that was not using the KitOps delete, that was using just the X delete on the keyboard. So what I can do is I come in here, and this is this difference. If I look at these, it's that one. So when I clean it, it's going to get rid of this last one. So I got rid of it. There you go. We can also create inserts, create decals. We can convert the whole thing to a mesh, which is nice. So let's do that. Let's take this and let's delete that insert. And let's just look at this part right here. It doesn't really matter how many inserts you have on here, but if I say convert to mesh, it's going to basically convert this whole thing to a mesh, and then I can remove unused wire inserts, and there we have that object there. Then we have convert assets, which basically allows you to convert from the existing library, the asset library in Blender. You can convert them into KPACKS and inserts. So you have to basically identify a folder as your KPACK, and then you convert whatever library you choose here in whatever catalog into this destination KPACK. So that's how that works. And I think that's really the key thing. One of the things that I'll mention is that it's much, much faster now. The actual operation of KitOps is significantly increased the way we're doing it now, like 100-fold. And we also don't conflict with other kinds of in-process add-ons like Box Cutter and HardOps and others that are actually using some of the depth graph stuff to listen for different calls. And we were doing that, but it just means that it slows things down when you do that. And we decided that we would optimize on performance. And so that means we don't have group mode anymore, and it simplified things quite a bit also. So that's helped as well. And of course, we have a lot of new features. One thing I will mention is that sometimes you want to get into the directory of where your KPACK is. And that's what this is. Open KPACK directory means it'll launch the actual directory. And this was the master ML box. All these features also exist in KitOps free. Some of them won't, but mostly the stuff where you're creating inserts like decals and inserts with cutters will not exist in KitOps free. And so these snap modes do exist. So if you use KitOps free, you can use it to do all this fancy snapping stuff as well. Okay, so let's talk about materials. KitOps has some unique materials abilities that are interesting to take a look at. So let's just go into some of these: KO emissive, KO metal, KO plastic paint, special mats. So these are materials that come with KitOps. We'll just, like, for instance, go into metal. Let's just add this. This is a aluminum mat. We'll just add this to here. And so when we add that, it renders up and looks pretty nice. So we got a little metal action there. And by the way, I should mention that these materials also have this bevel feature, right? So if you go into cycles, let me adjust this. Let's see, there we go. So you go into cycles, you'll see that it puts a little bitty bevel on every edge, and you can adjust this to, so say 0.01. I guess a little bigger one, that kind of thing. 0.005 might be a good one for this, but you don't want to make it too big because it's a rendered bevel. It's not an actual geometric bevel, but that's most all the materials that we have this feature in them. And keep in mind, samples needs to be at least 16, so you should probably just leave that alone. Let's go and talk about how we can change the materials in here. So if you notice, if you recall, we can go in here. Let's just go ahead and basically use our tools to convert that to a mesh and then remove the unused wires. So we have that, so we don't have to deal with that wire issue anymore. And I'm going to tab into this. Let's grab this one and this one, this one and this one. We're going to grab some of these. So I'm going to basically create a new material. So we look in here, we have the aluminum slot. Let's add a new one and let's assign this to a different material, right? So tab out of that and we'll see that's what we look like. And if we go back in here and let's grab a plastic one. So here's the plastic one. And I can just add that material and it'll put it right in that slot. So how cool is that? That'll just actually, I don't need to copy the slot or anything like that. It'll just stick it right there. So That's a neat feature. So another neat feature is, let's go ahead and let's take this little area and let's add this insert in here. And hit a face and there. Okay. And modifiers, let's shade auto smooth. So there we go. Okay. If I look at this and let's give this like a different kind of material, just that object. So I'm going to go ahead and look at that. Maybe the plastic paint, let's give it like a blue and add material to that. So nothing happens, right? But if I go into my materials for this object and I add a new slot and I just add that same blue, it's going to actually transfer it over there. So you can see that's how that works. So even though this is still part of the modifiers right here, you'll see that's still the blue color. So that's another cool feature that you need to be aware of. That's actually a Blender feature. It's not necessarily a KitOps feature, but that works pretty well. So the key thing to know in KitOps is that not only do you add materials to objects, but also you can add materials to slots in objects. And the other thing you can do is if I add a material, let's go Shift A and mesh, we'll do a monkey. Okay, and move him over here and also add that material to him. So notice that when we add a material to both of these and I change the color, it's going to change them in both. So that works pretty good. But what if I don't want that? Obviously I can go in here and I can just hit this button right here and I can make that a different color, right? So that's one way. Shift A, mesh, let's do a sphere and put that over here. Now, another way of doing it is just look over here and it says control. So we hit the control button and add that material. And now I can make it a different color too. So even though I've got the same one, I've got all of these 1, 2, 3. So that's a real neat feature, being able to add materials as separate materials, or typically KitOps will actually go ahead and look if that material already exists in the scene, it'll automatically add it using the existing material. So one thing I need to also mention is that we've also added the ability to take any of these buttons over here and right click on them. So if you select one, you can right click on it and you can say assign a shortcut. So that way you can actually add any shortcut you want to a button. For instance, for select insert, I had Control Shift A to that shortcut. So that shortcut key selects it. So that way, if I select just a part of it, I can Control Shift A, G, Z, whatever, or X, whatever. I can move it that way. This simplifies the workflow greatly. So just remember, you can add shortcuts to any one of these buttons over here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about installing KPACKS. So as KPACKS reside over here, and each one of these is a KPACK. And what does that mean? Let's go to Arch 2050, for instance. So here's all the different objects in here. Comes, by the way, with Design Magic. So let's open the actual folder this resides in, right? So this is the folder. Let's go ahead and view this by large icons. You can see, so this is the folder. So a KPACK is nothing more than a folder, right? So here's the folder. Here's the master folder, right? So there's a master folder. KPACKS come with a master folder. Inside has a bunch of different folders. So when you typically install a KPACK, when you purchase one or download them, that has a master folder, and each one of these really is the KPACK folders. And you can move these around if you want to, but they only go one deep, right? You can't put a folder inside a folder, and it's only one deep. And if you open it, you'll see that each one has a blend file, a special blend file. I should say this is just not any blend file. It's one that we've created because it does some other special things when you import it and load it. And then a thumbnail. So each one of these has a thumbnail and a special little blend file. So that's the structure of a KPACK. So let's talk about installing those. What we do is we go to the preferences panel and we go into our add-ons and we open up KitOps and we have general, file paths, and search. Let's go to file paths. And in here we have this list. And what we need to do is we need to create another set. And this is for the master folders. This is all the master folders. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to find a master folder that I have. Let's install like Design Magic. So here's the Design Magic master folder. So what you do is you can select the master folder and then keep clicking, click one more time. And now once you see all the files, these are all the KPACK files for this particular master folder. If you go up, just go up one, right? So let's go back up one. So we're here now, this is the master folder, right? So basically click until you see the files, then go up one and accept it. And then you probably want to save your preferences when you did. If you have auto save preferences on, then you don't have to do it. It does it automatically. If you look over here, we're going to see that we have these new sci-fi characters, some aquarium stuff, etc. That's the DM other master folder. So if I want to delete that, I hit this X button and it just deletes it. And so now if I refresh, you'll see that there's only the ones that we had before. So let's go ahead and add the actual, let's go back to, here's the other one. Let's go up and let's go into Design Magic Master folder. And again, we drill down till we see the files go up one and accept. And now when we go over here, we'll see that we have all the Design Magic stuff right here. So decals, other cables. So you have that. There's all kinds of cool stuff in here. You have the minus for the cutters. These are cutters, different kinds of cutters that you can actually add to your scene. Don't forget, when you're snapping to things, by the way, you can use F to snap to face, N to snap to nothing, E for edge, and V, Victor, for the vertex. So that's important to remember. Okay, so let's talk about preferences for a second. So we're going to load up the KitOps preferences. There's a lot going on here. So let's get to it. The author, you can put your name here if you want. And this is basically when you create your own inserts, you can author them yourself. There's offset X, offset Y. You can play with that. That's just basically how far apart these gutters are. It's not a big deal, actually. This one is, though, Boolean Solver, whether it's exact or fast, is important. And that's when we cut things out. Like I talked about in this particular one here, as you look at it, you'll see that its solver is exact. Fast is going to be much faster, but exact is going to be much more accurate. And when you're adding a bunch of cutters to an object, you want exact, really. It takes longer than the process. So if you have a slow system, you may want to just default it to fast. And in fact, KitOps does default to fast. So you may want to switch that out. Thumbnail labels, that's just basically showing these little labels under here, which is always good. Remove KitOps properties when no target. We talked about that before, but that's just basically, if we come in here and let's grab something like a solid, and we'll grab like just a cylinder, and I'm going to add that to here. So there's a target here. So I'm going to click on that. This is already turned off. I didn't add that directly to the scene. If I add it directly to the scene, so if I go in here and let's just grab and just deselect everything and add it to the scene, let's move it around. So now if I go into any kind of cutter and I want to add it to this, I can add the insert here and it'll cut along the edge here. I'll just hit N, or that's the V for vertex, but it'll cut just fine, right? But if I click on this thing and add the insert, you see it doesn't do anything. And that's because this has KitOps properties associated with it. As we mentioned before, the important way to solve this problem is just to go and say place unselected insert, or just remove the KitOps props. When you remove the KitOps props, then all of a sudden you have the ability to place it on there. So that's what that does. This is on by default, but if you find yourself that you need to maintain the KitOps properties, you can do that by turning this off. Sort modifiers. This basically sorts the different modifiers, including the new smooth by angle for 4.2. So basically, when you go into something like this object right here, and you say shade auto smooth, it puts a smooth by angle down here, right? And now let's go ahead and add another cutter to this. So here's another cutter, but notice that when we look at these, you'll see that auto smooth stays at the bottom, right? And you can do the same thing if you wanted to. I don't typically do this, but if you wanted to, you could add a bevel right here. So if you turn that one on, and then we just go into here and we say, let's just take this and add a modifier, the bevel modifier. And we're going to move that above the smooth by angle a little bit. Oops. Not clamp it. So let's just turn this off so we can see what's going on. Okay, there's our bevel right there. So now when we add another object to it, an insert, you can see that even as we're adding it, it's going to actually keep, once again, it's going to keep the bevel for this object at the bottom, even though this is the insert we just added. So that's what that does. I don't like to keep that on there because a lot of times I have bevels above and below and all kinds of things. So I don't typically do that, but that's what that does. Export settings. What is good about this is that when we talked about earlier how to create all these file paths, all this stuff, if you export this is going to save it as a JSON file in wherever you want it to. And then you can import that setting if you ever have to reinstall KitOps. You don't have to go through setting all this up. So that's what that does. Install thumbnail caching engine. Actually, it's already installed on this machine, but when you hit it, it's going to basically go get the latest version of the pip library. And then when that's done, it only gets installed once. And a lot of different add-ons automatically do this as well. So as you can see, thumbnail engine installed successfully. So it just makes this thing zip along quite a bit faster. And then you have a favorites. You can clear all the favorites. So the favorites are up here. So if I like, for instance, if I like this KitOps negative thing, I can say, okay, that's my favorite right there. And then I can go to plus and I can say, there's my favorite. And then I can go to others and say, that's a favorite. So I can put lists of favorites. And when they pass, let's grab arrays, favorite that. And we'll go into, let's say cables, favorite that. And let's add one more. This widgets 1. And we'll favorite that. So it goes to another line. And I think we can do up to 3 lines. And this is just the recent ones that you've added. This is just always going to have the last one. So if you go back and forth between KPACKs, you can see it. Now this is a pro only feature. It doesn't come up in free, but it's a nice feature, especially if you have a lot of KPACKs. So it works out pretty good. So this obviously clears all the favorites. So if you hit this, it'll clear all the favorites. One of the things we didn't talk about in here, you can also create sets of KPACKs. So if I said, I just want to create a set called DM for Design Magic. So we'll do that. Create that. And now I can say, let's just turn off everything but Design Magic. Okay, and that's what that is. And that's the set. So the set's called DM. So now if I come over here and I just want to see my DM set, I'm going to have just the Design Magic stuff in here. So I can create sets. Easy way to manage that stuff. Search feature is really good because when you have a ton of these, and I've got literally hundreds of KPACKs of different stuff that I've done over the years, but I can just basically just look at all the master folders here, regardless of whether they're turned on or not. Remember, all we're seeing is DM, right? So if I want to look for something let's search for something called mill because, or BNC, like a BNC connector, like, search on that. And notice that, okay, so here it is. So if I load that insert, you'll see that I've got different connectors that I can load. So that basically, remember that we were in the DM. It automatically found that one. Notice that it wasn't part of the DM set that we had and loaded it into all and found that one. So that's really a good feature too. So let's talk about creating inserts. So first off, when you're going to create an insert, understand that you can create inserts using KitOps free if they're just regular inserts. They don't have any cutters or unions or any of this stuff because you can't get into factory modes in KitOps free. All you can do is create an insert. So what do I mean by that? Let's go ahead and show this test folder right here. And I've got a bunch of these different ones out here. So I've got stuff in here. This little object file is called a house, right? So I'm just going to name it a house because whatever you name it is what's going to be in there. And turns out I have one called house in this KPACK. So I'm using this SY cutter, which is really almost all the inserts come with that SY cutter on them. I just use that as just a blank material file. You can use any material file you want. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, I'm just doing that. And notice that the center of this house is not on the bottom. And if you want to insert it, you want the origin of that object going to be in the bottom. And you also want to make sure that your scale is 1 and that your rotation is 0 and that there's no parenting or anything going on with this. It doesn't have children, or this is just for KitOps free. Keep in mind, if you're doing it in Pro, you can have parenting and some other things. But even in KitOps Pro, make sure rotation is 0 and scale is 1 at least for the parent object. And then you can just right click on it and say KitOps. You can say create insert, use bottom of object as origin, or if you go into the KitOps in here and under tools, you have create insert here. And when you do it here, it's just going to basically be the same thing as KitOps, create insert, use object origin. It doesn't do use the bottom of object as origin. So we're just going to right click and say KitOps, create insert, use bottom of object as origin. Let's go over this one more time. First thing we do is we want to rename the object to what we want it to show up here in the KPACK. And then what we want to do is check rotation and scale, which is good. Next thing we want to do is we want to make sure we get the right KPACK, right? So whatever KPACK you choose here, this is where this is going to be put. And then we just right click on it and say KitOps, create insert, and we're going to use the bottom of the object as origin. It's going to overwrite the existing file. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, and let's go file, new, general. And let's just take like this object right here, and we'll go into here and we'll just find that same test. And there's the house. And we're going to add that insert here, spell it around, put it wherever we want to. So that shows you how easy it is to create an insert and then use it. And you can scale it. And again, I can relocate the insert and rotate it if I want. So scale it. I can hit the F key, snap it to a face. The E T, snap it to an edge, turn the C off. I can slide it along the edge, and the V key, of course, will snap it to a vertex. Or I can hit the N key, N is in none, and I have no snapping mode. So that's really the basics of just creating an insert. Now, one thing you can't do if you're in KitOps free, but you can do in KitOps Pro, is you can say edit the insert. So when I edit the insert, when I hit the edit insert button, you'll see that it shows up here in a separate instance of Blender, right? We call this factory mode. Let's add a cube here and let's scale it. And let's move it to the top and let's move it over here. Okay, and then now I can hit this and say Control plus to Boolean union it. You can obviously take this cube anywhere I want to, and I can move it wherever I want and scale it. And this is our chimney, right? And so then I'll take that and I'll say Shift D, scale it up, scale it in, something like that, and take this and say Control minus to add a Boolean subtract modifier. And I can take this little guy and just stretch him out all I want and move him down so he goes far down into that thing. Get the idea. Okay, now once this is done, you'll see that we have 3 objects over here. We're in KitOps edit mode. Now notice KitOps has changed. The whole interface has changed. Why is that? Because KitOps understands that this particular folder that we're in, CW working test, that test folder, that is a KPACK. It understands it's a KPACK because it has a reference of all of the master folders here. And so it knows what the master folders are. And now it knows that we're in a master folder. Let's go ahead and I want to make this house sit into a hole. So I'm going to add another Shift A mesh cube, right? So I'm going to put a cube in here. And I'm going to scale it up just a little bit, right? Like that. So that's going to make a hole. And I'm going to maybe move it down like this. And let's look at the wireframe so we can move it up. Something like that. Okay. Just like that. So what I want to do is I want to make that a difference cutter. And that's going to cut into the object we place it on top of, right? So where do we want to place? Find with this cutter's origin, as that's where it will be placed. Maybe this will be our parent object. So if we look at this, and we look at this guy, and he needs to be a cutter. So let's go under here and look at KitOps and make sure that he's a cutter, and he's a cutter on the insert. Remember, he's cutting the insert, right? And then we have this one, and he's a cutter on the insert also. This one's cutting the actual object we're dropping it into. These ones are already existing cutters on this insert. So that's the difference between this. Real important to understand that. Oops. Is that this is a solid. And if you look at this solid, we have a union and we have a difference. And so both of these, this one being the union, it's a cutter and it should be tagged as insert. Because if it's on the insert KitOps, we'll use this correctly here. So this is a union. This one's a difference. So those are both on the inserts. This one is a cutter, and it's a difference cutter. It's going to do a Boolean difference on whatever we stick it on. With that done, we need to create a hierarchy. So I always use the cutter as the main object. So I'll go in here and call that the main object, right? So that means if this is the main object, then we want everything else to be parented to it. So I'm going to hit A and say object, parent, object. So we're going to parent everything to it. Now, if I just grab this now, you'll see that everything's parented to it. So that's good. So we're in good shape now. These are not scaled correctly. As you can see, item, that's scaled wrong. So I might say Control A scale, but if I scale it, that works. This one, Control A scale. So we'll just make those scaled. They don't necessarily need to be as children, but it never hurts if you run into a problem. So now that this is done, we'll just go back into KitOps. We can say Save Insert. Now we want to make a new thumbnail. So what we do is we load the render scene, and then we say the camera to insert. Right there, and then I can look at it using cycles, and that's what it looks like. I'll turn this off. That's what it's going to be. Now, if I want to move it around or anything, I can just select it. Let's turn on it. Select it, and notice the cutout that it's going in there right there. I can select it, and let's go to View, and let's camera to View, and let's just move it around, scroll up, move it in. Maybe that's what we want right there. And then when we're done, go back to KitOps, and we have it lined up where we want to, and just say render thumbnail. Then you can close the thumbnail scene, but what I always do, since we've got all this other stuff in here, I always just say revert. So now that we have this done, we're going to go back into our scene here, and I'm going to delete that, and let's just go and delete that, and I'm going to take this object right here and refresh this, and there's our object, and I say add insert, and so I'm going to stick it here, and you can see it actually cut a hole where we want it to, and there's our new object as it's designed. And I can add more materials and stuff like that, but that's a real basic way of showing you how to do it. Now, if I was doing this before I created the object, I would probably just go in and just say, I don't need these as modifiers. I would just take this whole object and go in and say, this is a convert to mesh, right? Convert this whole thing to mesh, and then remove unused wires. That one we need to leave because we're going to save this, right? So what I can do now is I could name this house again, and go back up in here and just right click, just keep this one right here and create insert, override existing file. Yeah. And it's going to give us a different thumbnail, but it's good. So if I do file and we do this, we'll just add it one more time. There you go. So let's turn off our face orientation. You can see it. So and there we have our house sitting in this box. So that's a real quick example of how you create inserts and how you can modify them and edit them in the factory mode in KitOps Pro. Okay, so let's talk about how we save materials too. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to grab this house again, and let's just go up here to the material editor and let's do a new material. And we're going to make something, let's make it real metallic. Let's go ahead and we're going to bring this down just a little bit like a chrome, metallic all the way up, roughness all the way down. And then let's add a little bit of a bevel to it. Shift A, input, bevel, put that here. Samples 16, radius 0.01. And we're going to grab that and that just drops it right into the normal. Okay, I'm going to call this one, let's call this just matte. Okay, we'll call it chrome matte. And then we'll look at it in here. And you'll see it's got a little bit of a nice little radius on it, and it's chrome and all that. So get the idea. I'm not going to make anything fancy. You can build whatever you want. But so you want to save that. So basically, once you've done that, make sure you've named it what you want. Make sure you choose the right KPACK folder. And it's just pretty stupidly simple. You can right click on it, KitOps, and say create material, right? So once you've done that, it's going to basically save that and create a thumbnail for you. And then it's right up here. There it is. And so now I can go in and I can take any material and say, add that material to there, add it to there. So I can just add materials all day long to different places in this thing. You get the idea. And that's it for materials. It's pretty straightforward. That's how simple it is. Just grab any material you want. Now let's talk about how to make decals. We don't really need to have anything selected to create a decal. But what we do need is we need to know where we want to put it. So let's make sure, again, we're going to keep it in this test KPACK. And I'm going to right click, I say KitOps. And by the way, you can do this in here or you can do it in tools, right? So you can say create decal, create material. So either way works. So we come into here and let's go ahead and find, we're going to do this urban graffiti one. I'm going to look at some of these images. You can use, you can use color images. It's nice to have a transparency channel. You don't need to, but it's nice because it'll lead. So let's just grab this color one. This is a nice one. So we say create decal from file. So that's going to be throw up 6. So it's just going to basically give us a minute. And now there's our decal. So we'll just take it and let's stick it on here. And I can scale it and rotate it just like anything else, right? And one of the nice things though about decals is they come with a built-in shader with instructions on how it works. If you want it to be emissive, like right now, we've got lights in the scene. And if I turn all the lights off and I hook up this emissive shader, then it's going to be bright and I can make it like 5. It's going to be really bright. But if I just use the principal BSDF, it'll be fine there. I can also override it with just a solid color if I want and choose that color to anything I want to, or I can just turn it back down and forget that. But one of the cool things you can do is, let's turn the lights back on, is you can actually add this erosion to it. So you can just basically just drag this up and you can actually add like dirt and erosion to the actual decal. So whatever you have, you may want to, if you're creating something, you can add that to it as well. By the way, KitOps Batch, which is another product that we have, can do this for a whole folder of pings. It can do a lot of different things, but it can definitely do this for a whole folder of PNGs. And the PNG resolution can be 1K, 2K, 4K, 8K, whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. Depends on how big it needs to be. But keep in mind, it is something that's actually floating on the surface. It's attached to the surface, right? So for instance, let's just take this cube and let's just add a bevel to it. And let's turn off this cutter here. And we're going to make a bevel about a little bigger, something like this. Let's make it 20, something like that. And then let's take this and I'm going to relocate this insert and put it right on this edge of this bevel. And so when you've done that, you go down here and what you're going to do is you need to say the target. So click here and put this on the target and it's going to wrap it around. And then you can just adjust this offset just a little bit. Hold the shift key down, adjust it. And you'll see that decal can wrap completely around that. Now, sometimes what you're going to want to do is turn up the subdivisions, right? So if you look at this wireframe, you'll see that auto display, turn this off. See, that's what, so it's wrapping around there. So you may want to say, let's give it a little more than that. Let's give it maybe 4, 5, 6, something to match it. So there you go. So then now it's going to really wrap quite nicely and smoothly around that. It works good. And that's it for decals. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about KitOps Extra Utilities, which is a product that ships with KitOps Pro, and it's got some kind of neat features in it. With the new 4.2, you can install this normally as you do any other add-on, but with 4.2, you can just drag and drop it and just say legacy add-on and overwrite enable install. Okay, so we hit OK. And now what happens is we look down here in KitOps, we have this thing called Extra Utilities, and we can scroll down. And it's got some pretty cool features. So let's talk about that real quick. So one of the things that it can do is it can toggle the display types. So a lot of times if you're cutting something, you don't want to see this. You just want to see the result. So I can say toggle display types, and that just does that. It goes here, solid, wireframe, or bounding box. So the bounding box is good. So I can select all of these and say toggle display type and get them all into bounding box. So that's a neat feature. You can clean up duplicated materials. So let's just go in here and let's grab this mill box and let's look at it. And we're going to add a material. So I'm going to add material to that. Let's hit Z. Let's go look at this so we can see what's going on. Okay, and then we'll go here and we'll say add a material to that. Okay, KitOps is smart. When you add these materials, you'll know that it'll adjust all these materials the same, right? So it's the same material. So when it adds, it looks to see if there's any other existing material with that name. And if it does, it goes ahead and uses that. But if you want to, and you hold the control key down, right? So if I go over here and hold the control key down, I can add a unique material, right? So it's military green 001. And so I can change this one to another color. So I can do that in KitOps, but I may want to figure out how to combine all these materials. I don't want to have all these. I want all the material greens and the material 001 will be combined. So if I just go here and say clean up dupe materials, it'll fix it. It'll find the first one and it'll basically do that. So I now only have one material, right? Okay, so let's talk about this interesting remap material images feature. I don't think this exists in anything else I know of in Blender. It's a very unique feature. So let's first add a material. So we're going to add this material to this object, this cube. So we see this. And notice it's got a little dirt, and the dirt is actually created with an image called grunge.jpg. And if I say Shift-D, let's move this one over here. And I want the same texture, but I want to make it different colors. So let's go under here and say shader editor. And what I can do is just go over here again. And remember, if you hold the control key down, you're going to add a unique material instance of this. So it looks the same right now, but it's not the same because I can go in here and just change the color of this. And you'll see this differently. So if I see that, that's shows what I'm talking about. I've got two different materials, and each of these materials, actually, if you go into it, like we go into here, let's go into this dirty up thing. I'll hit tab into that. This has got this grunge JPEG 001. And if I look at this one and do the same thing, tab into it, it's got grunge JPEG. So if I go over here, the image editor, I'll see them both in here, right? So there's grunge and there's grunge JPEG. So let's just call this one dirt JPEG, whatever. We'll just call that one dirt JPEG. So I have two, dirt and grunge. And so they're two different ones, but they're exactly the same, as you can tell. So I want to basically search through all my materials and find, in the active materials, I want to find images that are the exact same and remap them for this scene. That way I'm not using the same image more than once because that chews up GPU memory. So let's go back into the 3D viewport and we'll just go down in here and remap material images. And so I say, okay. And it says, yep, found two of them. So it found two that were actually duplicated. And then you have this delete unused images. And if you notice that processed images replaced were two. And then if you go, let's just look in here in the image editor here, and you'll see that we have dirt and grunge, but dirt and grunge is still being held on to by 4.2. This works in 3.65 or 4.1, but 4.2 is holding on. So what you really need to do then is just purge recursive data blocks and just say, delete that. And now if we go into here, we'll see, yeah, it got rid of the dirt. It's just got grunge. And both of them are working. So that really is a great way to actually identify duplicate materials, no matter what their name, no matter where they're located. If they're active in a scene, they will get replaced. So purge recursive data blocks just basically says, if you've got extra stuff in here that you've deleted, it's the same thing as saying file, clean up, purged unused data. So we say local data blocks, link data box recursive. So we do both all that, and that'll get rid of that. That cleans that up. We talked about this. And then this can basically take any specific object that you have. Let's go ahead and add some more inserts to this, some cutters to this. Let's go in here and just, add this, and we're going to add something like this. Okay, and so if I look into here and I want to set those as fast, basically they're set to fast now. So now that's the fast. So that looks pretty good, set to exact. So this will swap them out for this particular object, right? So let's look at this object. You'll see that these differences, now they're fast, now they're exact. So it sets all of them in the same, in the actual object. So even if I go to this object here and we look at these differences, they're going to still stay as exact. So it doesn't do it for every object, just does it for one. Continuing on with extra utilities, here we have a plane. I'm going to just look at wireframe. So tab into it. These are vertices, and you can move these in any direction you want, as you guys know. You're familiar with that. But there's this new align verts command. So if I want to hit this, notice we're in the Y direction, the yellow Y direction. I can say align verts on the Y and align those exactly. And sometimes that's what you want. That is, you want to basically just take an average of them and align them. And this is the Y, and then maybe again that's the X. So you get the idea. That works. Now I should also just mention that there are shortcut keys for all of this stuff, right? If you look at this here, Control Alt X basically will align them in the X. So if you grab these two, Control Alt X gets them there. Control Alt C gets them in the Y. And if you want to do Z, like if I just take these, move them over here, select all these, Control Alt Z gets them all in the Z dimension. So that's what that works. Now the other thing I'll mention is, let's just add another cube and let's go to KitOps. Let's add something like this, add insert. So we'll move this in here. So here's an insert we've added. Now, as you recall, that we can use these toggle object display types all we want to do this, but we can also hit Control Shift. It'll tell you right here, Shift Control Alt Z. So that'll do the same thing, just toggles them back and forth. So a lot of times, if I want to edit this, I might go into local mode and go into here and say tab, make this, I want to move this up a little bit like this. And let's just shade it flat for now. Then tab, and then go back out of edit mode and then Control to the Z and move it down. And so I get a different kind of a cutter there. So anyway, the point being that there's a lot of different uses for this particular feature. A lot of times you got way too many wires showing. You just want to get them all into bounding box mode. And you can select multiple ones. You can select everything and make them all do that the same way. So anyway, so that's how that feature works. That's what the new extra utilities add-on does.